Hello, welcome to the Black Ponder. I'm Neil Trotter. Today, we're going to be talking about something that's very important, and that's feminism. But we're specifically going to be talking about a branch of feminism or a part of feminism that's not really discussed about that much. It's kind of marginalized. There's some people, even feminists, who believe that this part of feminism shouldn't even exist. There's no need for it, but I think there's a need for it, and that is African American feminism. And we're going to be talking about that via this book, Black Feminist Thought by Patricia Hill Collins. It's very interesting because the last video I did was about Immanuel Kant's Critique of Pure Reason, and the central focus of that book is the idea that what somebody is very different from our perception of that person. So we create these perceptions based off of race and gender that are built off of false logic and have little to do with what somebody actually is. Doesn't really describe a person for what they actually are. However, these social ideological constructs that we create still cause discrimination against groups of people, like women, like people of certain ethnic groups, people of social economic class. That is the case, and it creates it holds humanity back. So what's the solution? We need to talk about solutions to these problems, right? Well, I would argue that one of the solutions is feminism. So let's talk about that. I had a debate with a friend, and it wasn't like a heated argument or anything like that. It was just a friendly, it was a nice discussion. This person, they don't believe in feminism. They hold this idea like, well, I'm a humanist. That's what I am. I believe that all people should have equal opportunity, and all people are pretty much the same. And things like feminism just create differences between people, and it just perpetuates this idea of segregation and discrimination. That's a problem with feminism, and I don't believe in it. I don't agree with that. I really don't agree with that. Am I a humanist? Yeah, I guess if you want to label me as that. I do also believe that everybody should have equal opportunity to succeed in life. That's definitely something I believe. But we also have to acknowledge the fact that women go through struggles that are very different from other groups of people. Something that holds somebody back based off of gender is different from what holds somebody back based off of social economic class. Two different things. So you have to approach the problem in different ways. And that's what feminism is. It's a specific way to approach the problem. Because if you just start trying to throw out ideas like, well, this is a solution that we can use to help all people succeed, that's not going to work, because there's different struggles and people go through different discriminations based off of things like gender, race, sexual orientation, etc., etc. You need to develop these different fields to fight against these different struggles. I think that's what really feminism is. You ask somebody what is feminism, and you might get a different answer based off of who you ask. It's still not well defined, I don't think. But part of what feminism is a group of theory, and is also a group of practices that try and address the specific struggles that women have to go through in life and try to rise above those. Now let's talk about something that the book addresses, which is very important to something where we need to understand. I'm sure a lot of people think like, well, why do you have this thing, why do you separate feminism based off race? Doesn't that defeat the whole purpose of feminism? But historically, let's look at this historically. Back in the 1970s, when feminism started really building up steam, and it was white middle class women really pushing feminist ideology to new heights, and they wanted to include African American women into that whole struggle as well. They're like, hey, join us. We're trying to fight for all women, and we'd be happy to have you. And a lot of the African American women, most of the African American women at that time was like, your struggle is an admirable struggle. I like where you're going, but the problems that you're addressing aren't really the problems that I'm addressing, or that I deal with. Your feminism doesn't really speak to me and my specific struggles. I don't really see myself being helped in what you call feminism. So I'm gonna let you do that, and I'm gonna just do what I'm gonna do to help myself. A lot of people were thrown off by that, like, whoa, we're supposed to help each other out. This is a common struggle of womanhood. But the thing is, we have to acknowledge that it's different for each group. Different groups go through different struggles, and you need to create specialized solutions to these problems. That's what needs to be acknowledged. That's what black feminism is kind of about. Let me read a quote that talks about that. The exclusion of black women's ideas from mainstream academic discourse and the curious placement of African American women intellectuals in feminist thinking, black social and political theories, and in other important thought such as U.S. labor studies has meant that U.S. black women intellectuals have found themselves in outsider within positions in many academic endeavors. The assumptions on which full group membership are based, whiteness for feminist thought, maleness for black social and political thought, and the combination for mainstream scholarship all negate black women's realities. Prevented from becoming full insiders in any of these areas of inquiry, black women remain an outsider within locations, individuals whose marginality provided a distinctive angle of vision on these intellectual and political entities. So it even talks about how the black social movement during that time was male dominated. It had like a male centric point of view. So even then, African American females felt not completely included in that struggle because a lot of it was male oriented. So you might be asking, like, well, how are white women's struggles different from black women's struggles, right? For example, just throwing examples out there, a lot of what the feminism was fighting against was like including women in the workplace, like defeating this whole idea that women are supposed to stay at home and raise the family. Women were like, yeah, we can go out, we can work, that's something that we can do. Well, the thing is, during that time when women were kind of pushing that idea to the forefront, African American women were already doing that. They were already in the workplace already. They didn't really deal with that specific kind of struggle. Like, they weren't really going through that. Their problems were more based off of, I'm working, but I'm not getting fair pay. I'm not getting paid at all. Or I'm getting harassed while I'm at work type of deal. This is during the early stages of feminism, right? Another example would be like how society views beauty. The sociological norm that's considered beauty is what? Is like blonde hair, blue eyes, white skin. That's true today. You look at billboard advertisements, commercial ads. That's what's normally considered the ultimate form of beauty in our society today. Even though that's not true in reality, that's kind of what society perpetuates. So based off of that, African American women kind of have to deal with that because they don't fit within that social norm of what is considered beautiful. Whereas white women more closely do fit in that social normal idea. So, there's all these different struggles. And this book goes in great detail about that. Like all the different things that African American women have to deal with specific to their realities and their struggles. And it tries to break that down for you. And this book does a really good job of that. So I'm not going to take any of its steam away. I would encourage you to read the book because you might be one of those skeptics. People like, that's pish tosh. Women go through the same thing women go through. And, it's all about the humanist ideology. And, we all need to just focus on the struggle of human equality. But this book talks about, it's not that simple. It's very complex. And people go through different struggles based off of their race and gender and sexual orientation and other things like that nature. And that's a reality that we have to face. And the only way we're going to solve a lot of the problems that deal with that is we have to create specialized solutions. Black feminism is one of those specialized solutions. Even within the group that is African American women, there's differences even then, that different African American women go through different struggles. And so you can't even fully, completely generalize that. Check out this quote. There has never been a uniformity of experience among African American women, a situation that is more noticeable today. What remains as a challenge to black feminist thinkers working class and middle class alike, is to analyze how these new structures of oppression differentially affect black women. If this does not occur, some U.S. black women may in fact become instrumental in fostering other black women's oppressions. So basically what's being said is that African American women have to acknowledge that there's differences even within their own social group. And in that way we can begin to start solving the problem of oppression. And it goes into the fact that black women are treated differently based off of their social economic class. The book talks about this whole, the hoochie mama perspective, right? That a lot of lower income African American women get thrown into because that's kind of the perception we deal with when we like look at MTV music videos and such, and hip hop videos and things like that. We see a lot of those, and then we throw African American women in that category. Or if an African American woman is doing good financially, they're kind of thrown in this other category. And there's many names. What I hear a lot is this thing called super bitch, which is like, to be in that position of being well off economically, they have to be, African American women have to be very aggressive because they have to fight through a lot of struggles that a lot of other groups don't have to fight through. So they come off very aggressively sometimes, and so that a lot of people throw in that term on them. Like, oh, this position of power, oh, you have to be like this super bitch because, I don't want to mess with you, you're too domineering, this, that, the other thing. And that may or may not be the case, but we as a society throw African American women in these different groups, and it holds African American women back, it oppresses them. We even have to acknowledge that each individual deals with discrimination and oppression differently. Here's another quote. Based on their personal histories, individuals experience and resist domination differently. Each individual has a unique and continually evolving personal biography made up of concrete experiences, values, motivations, and emotions. No two individuals occupy the same social space, thus no two biographies are identical. For example, you take somebody like an African American woman who is a lesbian is going to have struggles that are very different from, like, let's say an African American female that comes from an affluent family. Like, they're well off economically, right? The African American lesbian might go through life and people are just saying like, well, I don't understand. Why are you gay? Like, you're black. Black people aren't gay. The black people are, they know they're like the straightest of straight people. That just doesn't make any sense. So they have to go through that whole thing because society kind of portrays black people in that manner. Or, like the upper middle class African American female they'll always be considered a snob, like all the time. Like, oh, she's a snob. She's so rich. Like, she doesn't even understand what black people go through. And, I can't relate to her. She doesn't really truly understand the black experience because the black, you need to be poor to, she doesn't get it, because, and that right there might be a struggle in and of itself. Again, we're just throwing out all these social perceptions that aren't really based off of any real truth or reality. They're just kind of just crutches we kind of rely on we kind of use to define people that ignore what people really are. So what's the solution? Well, Black Feminist thought talks about a lot of solutions that we can do. But one of the main solutions is a quote. I'll read this quote for you. When it comes to knowledge, black women's empowerment involves rejecting the dimensions of knowledge that perpetuate objectification, commodification, and exploitation. So African American women need to reject all the perceptions that are thrown on them that try and define them to rise above them so that they can succeed better in life. But that's a very easy thing to say, but it's very hard to do. And I want to go back to Immanuel Kant's Critique of Pure Reason, right? Where it talks about, our perceptions are false. And they have really nothing to do with what something really is. Same thing with, we have all these perceptions of what an African American woman is and what an African American woman should be, which have nothing to do with what African American women actually, who they really are. But the thing is, those perceptions really present, they really can control society. I mean, we can rise above them, but it's very hard because it's so ingrained in our culture, in our society, and we have to really struggle to rise above it. Just because I say like something is false doesn't mean that it's not creating a real struggle. Like, it's definitely a real, even though it's false, it's creating a real struggle. In fact, the reason why the struggle is so real and powerful is because what it's based off of is false. And that's what we need to remember. And we have to just remember that these perceptions are false, they're not real. So African American women, and just people who are in any discriminatory group, need to acknowledge that for themselves first. Realize like, hey, I'm not this, what you're telling me I am, that's not who I actually am. And we need to step up and be like, this is who I really am. But that's hard to do. And Black Feminist thought goes in great detail about the steps that we can take to do it. It throws out a lot of things that are really good. But I rather focus on, again, let's talk a little bit about false perception, because I kind of like that. Black Ponder, one of the main themes of this channel is reality. I like talking about reality and what reality really is versus what we think reality is. Let me read a quote from you that kind of relates to me, to my group, an African American male. I like this quote, is really interesting. Many young U.S. blacks grew up in communities that were markedly different than those prior to the 1980s. Extended family networks weakened, and while U.S. blacks became more class stratified, the racial segregation in housing that fosters inequities of education and employment also persisted. Many young black men came to see their futures only in terms of being rap stars, basketball players, or drug dealers. Many young black women saw few options other than motherhood. Overall, young black men and women could not see the optimism of the diverse anti-racist social justice projects of the 1950s and 1960s, but instead encountered the pessimism of shrinking opportunities. Ostensibly the beneficiaries of the previous generation's black activism, they learned to live with new forms of control introduced by expanding criminal justice system and a punitive social welfare bureaucracy. For many young black men and women, access to African American intellectual and political traditions, feminist and otherwise, remained elusive. Instead, they found themselves living in impoverished economic and intellectual environments. And that's pretty much the situation I went through when I was growing up. To be quite honest, and that's not new. A lot of African Americans pretty much went through that are around my age. You grow up, you don't see too many options. Yeah, like I say, you can either be like a rap star, that's pretty big. You either be in sports, primarily basketball, if you're like my type of build, lanky, or if you're a big guy, you play football, maybe baseball, I don't know. Or you could be a drug dealer. That's like kind of more the easier way, like high risk, high reward, and those are pretty much your only options. But I broke through that whole narrow point of view because of my great upbringing. I had like a great mom and a great grandma who raised me right. He taught me like, hey, you can do all types of things. They gave me books to read when I was a little kid. They definitely gave me a lot of things, resources. Even though they didn't have much, they gave me a lot of books, and they showed me a lot of options that were outside the norm. And it helped me out. Let me talk to you about my mom for a minute. Now, while I was growing up, I like a lot of African American men, I don't know who my dad is. I never met the guy before. I was raised single parent. Mom worked. Grandma stayed in the house to raise us while my mom went out to work. And oftentimes my mom was I remember times where my mom worked 7 days a week. Full-time job, 7 days a week. And actually, that wasn't unusual either. That was a lot of where I grew up. That's a lot of mothers were doing that. And for me, it really was more unusual to see somebody with a mom and a dad. Like, that was kind of strange when you saw that. So let me tell you, while I was growing up, my perception of what a woman was is very different from like the overall of what society threw at me. I'm seeing my mom. She's working, doing hard work. Working all the time, 7 days a week sometimes. She's basically doing everything that a man should do and what a woman should do. And I'm also seeing a lot of my friends, their mothers are doing the same thing. The grandmas are strong centers of the family. There's not a lot of male centers in the family from what I'm seeing and what I've seen in my community. So what happened to me was like, okay, I'm not really seeing this frail, weak version of a female that society is kind of portraying. So to this day, based on how I was raised, how I grew up, like, I know women can be just as strong as men. Like, I've seen that, and I've also seen how women can succeed without help from men at all. I've seen that firsthand. Now, I'm not saying it was easy for my mom. It definitely was not. It was very hard for my mom. She went through a lot of stuff, a lot of struggles. And if there was a dad in the house, it would have been a lot easier for her, and it would have been a lot easier for the family. But despite that, I turned out okay. My brothers turned out okay, and the family is a strong, happy family. So personally, if you were to ask me, like, okay, Neil, are you a feminist? I would say yeah. But I would say there was not one point in my life where I changed my attitude, like, okay, I'm a feminist now. I think I was born a feminist, pretty much, because in my mind, a feminist is somebody who believes that women can contribute just as much to society as men, despite their differences in biology and everything like that. They can work just as hard and contribute just as much. And I see that firsthand. I see this so much, actually, that when I went to college and I started going outside my community, I was kind of shocked by this whole idea of women just being frail, and the whole chivalry thing. I wasn't ready for that. When I started dating girls in college. In high school, it was cool because all the women where I'm from, they kind of don't really need all that. But in college, they're kind of expecting me to open the door and do the chivalrous things. I'm like, I don't need to do any of that. So it took me a while to get the game right, which is funny. And that's great. It's great to do those type of things to show affection. But I think the mistake we have is, you do those things, you do those chivalrous things, like kind of treating women like they need a man. You do them to show your affection. You don't really do them because without doing them, women are gonna fall apart, or they're not gonna function properly. That's kind of what we think today. That's the problem. Men just simply need to acknowledge that women are just as capable as they are, and support them as much as the women support the men. Anyway, check out Black Feminist Thought. Personally, I think this is a modern classic. I think anybody who calls themselves a feminist should have this on their shelf. This will give you a great education. In the introduction, the author talks about, I wrote this book for black women, and a lot of black women will probably read this and be like, yeah, I kind of know this already. But it's really good to just see it in this nice, scholarly, well-researched, well-written, published work. It's nice to have it acknowledged, and for people who are feminists who don't really know the African American struggle, this is a great book to read. It's also good to know if you're just curious and you want to find out what African American women have to deal with. This is a very important read. This is also really good for African American men to read as well. I would consider myself a target group for this book. It is a modern classic. I would definitely put it up there, and it's a must read if you call yourself a feminist. This is the Black Ponder. I thank you for watching. I'll see you next time for more philosophical thought.